Okay, good evening, students. And to get started here this evening, just going to take care of a few housekeeping things. We only have, after tonight, there's only 3 more weeks left in this cycle. And you guys are finishing up and things. Keep up the good work and be persistent to turn your material in on time. On the canvas is a list of the dates that each thing is due, so please adhere to those things. And one of the things that I will do away with, just because of the way that things have gone as far as this cycle with the coronavirus, and just altered a lot of things, so I will do away with the roll call attendance things. That's really changed up a lot of stuff, so I'm going to do away with that. And your MFT models are due the 5th of May, which is the last day of class. And wish that, like I said last week, I wish that we could do these as presentations, but we can't. Your genogram is due the 28th of April, so if you're working on that, continue to work on it and get it to me as soon as you can. That is the deadline, but you can turn it in as soon as you have it. The literature review. We come to the literature review. I just want to ask you, first of all, if you've been able to find an article and things with the coronavirus, has that created a problem as far as getting to the library? I know that it has here, and I've checked with another school. Their library is closed. I checked with the online things with these 2 journals listed, the 2 names of these 2 journals. There is a cost in that. I am not wanting you to incur a cost. You've spent a lot of money with your books and stuff, so I'm not asking you to incur a cost here. But let me know, all right? Just if you can, even right now, for those 3 who are live streaming right now, you can just say yes or no, shoot a text here, email me or something, let me know so that I can plan and make some arrangements or adjustments if we need to do that with the literature review. All right, so just let me know. Please send me a text right here, or however this works, and it pops up so I can read it. Shoot me an email right here. I have this up as well, so let me know on the literature review, because I want to be able to help you guys in this. So if you have one, fantastic. Please don't buy them. All right, please don't buy them unless you want to subscribe to those journals. That's different. If you're going to subscribe and pay the fee, then that's different. That's up to you. I'm not asking you to do it for this class. I don't want you to do it for this class. It's an expense that you as a student don't necessarily need to incur at this time, being that we are in this type of situation in our society right now with the social distancing and things. So once again, just to reiterate, let me know if you found an article. All right, let me know if you have found an article yet, and let's make some adjustments if we have to. And what I'm thinking, so is to go ahead and do away with that and give you the points for it anyway. So just let me know, okay? So just to reiterate everything, doing away with the roll call because we can't do that with the social distancing. Your MFT models are due the 5th, the genogram the 28th, and the literature review, please just let me know where you stand with that as well. It's coming to an end. We have just 3 weeks left after tonight. May 5th will be your final and things. So just let me know where you're at, how things are going, If I don't hear from you, I'm just going to assume that everything is fine. Okay? So this evening, I want to, because of the nature of the class, non-traditional family, not to go over any of that definition again, we've covered that too much, but because we're looking at the family structure and stuff, I want to share something with you tonight that even though, well, let's look at it this way, all right? Whether it's a non-traditional family or it's a traditional family that come in for counseling, an individual that comes in for counseling, what I want to share with you tonight, you can use in any type of setting. So it's information for you to have as a counselor that you can use to guide somebody through some things that they might be experiencing. It's this what I'm getting ready to show you tonight is more along the lines of, well, it's actually along the lines of a spiritual context. That's where this is all going to be, is on a spiritual context. But this stuff can actually transcend into a secular setting and things. Let's say that you're in a secular setting, but they know that you are a Christian and they're fine with that. This can be applicable to that. You can use this in that type of setting. You might want to make a little bit of adjustment, but the truth of this right here is very, it's there. You don't have to deviate it from it that much, but it's a type of model. It's a spiritual type of model to help some people understand some different things about why they came into counseling, what they're there for, and it covers a multitude of things here. So to get started with this, and just to say, let's see. All right, so one student, you say that you haven't found one yet. All right. So we're basically dealing with the same thing that, because I've received an email from another student that they have struggled with finding one too. So for that student here, I will, let's see what else happens and things as far as who else hasn't found one. I might just move to the direction of just giving you guys the 25 points. But what I want you to do, and taking the assignment away, but what I want you to do with this assignment though, is I really want you to, when all this is lifted and we can actually get back and do some gathering and go to the library and different things like that, these things, like I said, don't incur the cost, but go somewhere to get these articles or these journals. Look up the articles that are there, find one that interests you, and read it, and go through this assignment anyway. It helps to expand and broaden your base of knowledge on different types of publications that are out there, the research that's being done out there as well. So we might just go ahead and pull that. I'll let you know for sure. I'll shoot you an email tomorrow, but please, students, just let me know whether you found one or not. I'll shoot you an email, but I'm leaning more towards just giving you the points for it, and let's go on with the rest of the semester. All right, so what we're going to talk about here, okay, talking about a relationship now, and this is going to be dealing more along the lines of a husband and wife, but it could be, a different type of relationship as far as a parent, a child, and things. But this is going to be more towards the husband and wife type of relationship. All right. Now, to get started here, as we talk about this, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning of time. Get through creation week. We're at day 6, and God is closing out his creation, and he's made Adam, he's made Eve. All right, so, and I hope that, let's try this out here. Doesn't work. I need to see if this is going to show up. Okay, so here we have at the very top, and naturally, is God. And God being the creator, not only creator, but the sustainer of all life and everything that Genesis 1 and 2 give us, okay? He is the primary source for bonding. He is a primary source for bonding. And when we come down here to what is at the end of creation, okay, he has created Adam and Eve. So we find this, and one place we find it, Genesis 1:27, I believe it is, 26. Genesis 1:26. All right. So here we also see in Genesis chapter 2 about creation as well. But he made Adam and Eve, and as he created them, and here's what, when you're reading the J. Adams book, the Marriage, Divorce, and Remarriage, when you're reading that book, you'll find in chapter 1 a lot of things right here of what I'm getting ready to share with you, okay? So what he has done as far as creating Adam and Eve, he has created this for a relationship, all right? These two are to be in a relationship. At the same time, they're in a relationship with God because he's the primary source for bonding. All right, bonding together, coming together. All right, he's the primary source for bonding. What he has done right here with them together, coming together in a companionship, they have this relationship, they're going to have this relationship. As they come together, what they are able to do is have independence right here. Independence to bond with God. So these, Adam and Eve, have the independence. It's the independence to bond with God. They have this. They're able to do this. They're able to bond with God on their own. They're able to bond with God also corporately. So there's companionship here, all right? They are together as far as companionship. God made it this way for companionship. He's the primary source, created this for here. We also find in this relationship here that, even though I did it that way, but in this right here is the second bonding source, all right? The second bonding source between Adam and Eve is the second bonding source, okay? This is companionship, and you see that in J. Adams' book in chapter 1, companionship, created it for companionship here as well. The story as it unfolds for us, the story comes down, and we get to down here into the very next chapter in Genesis chapter 3, all right? Genesis chapter 3. In this chapter itself, okay, the pivotal point of all human history, one of the pivotal points, but it's at this point here that creates everything else that comes after this in Scripture. At this point, Adam and Eve get this here. Have a decision to make. Okay? They have to decide. All right? They have to decide, first of all, will they trust God? Actually, that's the decision in of itself. Okay? The decision that they have to make, which is a decision that all of us have to make in different areas of our life, no matter what we're facing at different times in our life as well. They have to make a decision at this point. Okay? Adam and Eve, that's the second bonding source, the companionship here. They get down here, it's the time to make a decision. We all face this. All right? We all face this. So if they decide at this point, which we already know the story, but let's say that, well, let's stay with this. If they say yes to trusting God here, okay, they say yes to trusting God, then at this point, they come back up to the primary bonding source. It moves back up to the bonding source if they say yes. If it's no, okay, which for you and I, when we get to this point of asking or happen to make a decision on trusting God, okay, we say yes, we're coming back up to the primary bonding source in this process, okay? They said no, and at the point of saying no is self-deception. It's self-deception. So when you're working with clients and you're working with them in a family setting, all right, or whether it's in an individual setting, but let's stay with the family setting and we draw this out right here, you could put their names right here. They're created by God. God is the primary bonding source. They have a secondary bonding source right here, which is companionship, all right? And they're at a point here, and it's not Genesis chapter 3 because that's already happened. It's not Genesis chapter 3, but whatever struggle that they might face in their, or the reason why they're in counseling is right here, okay? We could put that right there and say, whatever it is, okay? But relational struggles, infidelity, abuse, verbal abuse from him to her and stuff, or whatever. Whatever we're putting right here, the reason why they're in counseling, we put right there. And when we're dealing with this and they come to this point, all right, they themselves right here are struggling, their marriage is struggling, they come to this point here, what are we making a decision for? Both of them need to make a decision that they're going to come back up here to the primary bonding source in their marriage, all right? Or they're going to stay right here and say no, which ends up being self-deception, which with this self-deception is actually self-centeredness, all right? And what they're doing right here is making a decision to be unbiblically happy, Nowhere in Scripture does it tell us that our life as a believer is going to be easy. We don't find that in Scripture. But we have been deceived by Satan in a lot of ways to think that we can be happy outside of this bonding source right here, which is nothing more than self-deception. So whatever their issue is in counseling, why they come here, we can put that there and say, okay, let's make a decision. It's a decision time. We're going to say yes and go back. Now both of them need to agree to this, okay? Both of them need to agree to this to go back to this primary bonding source. They stay with you in counseling because now they need help working through these situations right here. If they say no, this is going to be a difficult time. It'll be a very big challenge for them, and a challenge for you as well. All right? But if you draw this out like this and help them to see these things, and this is a lot of times can be done to help them see things, to give them a better, kind of like a roadmap of what is happening in this right here, in their life, and help them to see and help them to actually make a more intellectual decision of which way they want to go and stuff. Even down here when they say no, we can still try to not coerce them, okay, but to give them information, instruction, and things on the fact of what could happen if they stayed at this level right here, right? As a counselor, you're not in there to persuade them that this is what they need to be doing. They need to come to that decision. They need to come to that conclusion on their own, that this right here is not going to help them out. They need to learn to trust God and come up here back to the primary bonding source, work out their problems, learn and develop them as an individual, and learn and develop their relationship to one another so that their family can actually grow and develop the way that God intends for the family to grow and develop. So with this right here, as I've already said, with this right here, if they move in this direction, all right, they move in this direction, we can continue to chart this out. All right, we can continue to chart this out. So, once again, up here, we'll come back up here to God is the primary bonding source, all right? But it's going to come out a little bit different than what we see before, all right? So this line right up here, as it goes up there, it deactivates this connection. It deactivates this connection right here, all right? So, and if you remember in the genogram symbols, it's kind of different right here, but we still have this here, but there's going to actually be a break. All right, there's a break right here. It's a break to the primary bonding source, and this square down here now is sin, right? An attachment to sin, which now it's going to be the third bonding source, okay? An attachment to sin. What does this attachment to sin do to this relationship? Well, it's going to create all kinds of problems, is what it's going to do. But before we look at that, we still have down here, we'll do this a little bit different here. So here, sin has its influence and impact on both people in this relationship, right? But there is still right here, there is still right there some shared thoughts and behaviors. Right, so right here in this area, between Adam and Eve, between the husband and wife, there's still shared thoughts and behaviors, even though the third bonding source is going to be sin. What ends up with this right here, and this is not necessarily how it you can draw it out, but we can just keep it this way as far as showing different things. Like for one, there's this avoidance of God. Okay, there's this avoidance of God. Okay, what ends up right here with the avoidance of God is expressed insecurity. And I know that you can't see that very well on there, but let me go through it after we get it all up here and everything. And with down here with Eve, and we can put in just about anything we want to here. And I'm just writing in right there anxiety. All right. You can put in here depression. You can put in here other different things as far as any type of mental problems there. So anxiety, depression. We could have different things as far as bipolar things and stuff. But what ends up happening here, even though they share thoughts and behaviors, because we all have thoughts and behaviors, a lot of this is still the way that God has created us, our thoughts and behaviors. God gave us these things so that we could be people, so that we can be humanity. So now, and here again, I'm just trying to see how it looks on the board, and it's kind of obscured and things, but as we drop down here. But before we do that, let me go back, okay? Let me go back. So, as a review, because I want to be able to put more up here. So as a review, right here with this, we have God as our primary bonding source. God is our primary bonding source. He created Adam and Eve, okay? He created Adam and Eve, and with that was a companionship. That becomes the secondary bonding source, the second bonding source right here, all right? He created Adam and Eve, but they have the independence to bond with God, a decision to bond with God themselves, all right? So it's the secondary bonding source. This is the primary, this is the secondary. So here in Scripture is Genesis chapter 3, a decision needed to be made, just like it needs to be made in our lives, just like it needs to be made in anybody's life, is, are they going to trust God? Going to trust God. At this point, you're going to trust God. If you say yes, then you're coming back, and you're not necessarily coming back, but it's showing that you're going back to the source, the primary source of your bonding. You're going back to this type of relationship. That's if you say yes. In this decision-making time, you say yes, and you're keeping this all together the way it should be. If you say no, it's basically self-deception. And when we get at this point, by saying no, self-deception, we're coming over here where we're breaking, okay? We're breaking this primary bonding source. We're breaking it by doing this right here. All right, we're breaking that. This now, so here's the primary, here's the secondary, right here is the secondary in this companionship, this relationship. Now we've created, by saying no and breaking that primary, we've created a third bonding source right here with sin, and now it affects this relationship. But this relationship, we look here that every person has thoughts and behaviors. Okay, this is God, part of God's creation right here. Okay, but as we have our own thoughts and behaviors, some of it is to avoid God, which creates anxiety, which creates expressed insecurity. all right? Our thoughts and behaviors when we are committed to this third bonding source is to avoid God. We want to avoid God because of this right here, which ends up with expressed insecurities and anxiety. Now, different things to be listed right here, all right, with anxiety, like I said, with depression, okay? Now, this right here, on this side, right here, okay, this right here affects closeness with this right here. Okay, with this relationship, with this companionship that God created over here, gets affected by this right here with the avoidance of God, the insecurity and things. It affects closeness, not only, I should say, here, but also with this. Okay? It affects the relationship between the husband and wife. It's going to affect the relationship with God as well. Okay? Not only affects closeness, okay, it brings out distrust. It brings out distrust. You get this right here going on, all this right here going on. It affects the closeness in the relationship. It brings out distrust in the relationship, which with this right here, with the lack of trust, because there's distrust here, with all this going on, then there's going to be a lack of emotional support. All right, now here again, I apologize that this doesn't show up that clearly for you guys. So let me just kind of go through this. Let me just kind of go through it. When we get to this point here, and let's say that this couple, they come in and they get to and this is where they're at. Okay, they've already done this stuff right here, and they've come in and they're needing to work on things in their relationship, but we're also needing to work on things in the relationship with God. We need to bring this couple, not only individually, okay, not only individually do we need to bring these people right here back into this right here. We need to bring them back together in this right here, the companionship. But this right here, the avoidance of God because of this, the sin, whatever that might be, in their reason for coming into counseling, they're avoiding God, which they have this insecurity, and it begins to be expressed through this right here that creates the anxiety, creates the depression, creates distrust in the relationship. It affects the closeness of the relationship, and a lot of times there's the lack of emotional trust or emotional support in that relationship. It's a not necessarily a complicated diagram to share with the couple, all right? It's not, it just looks that way, but it actually can bring to light a lot of things in their situation. It's fascinating to see this actually unfold in a counseling situation, to draw this out and to see it unfold in a counseling situation. This is one reason why I like to have whiteboard in an office, is because you can do this right there with the client and walk them through this, and through the process you are pausing to help them understand it as you're walking through. Now here, if we were in if you guys were here in the classroom, I could walk you through this and demonstrate it in a better situation than through the internet. But it helps to understand, okay, Okay, so now I kind of get it. I do have a better picture of it. But what do we do from here? Or there might be some of this when you're right here, there might be some hesitancy, not in one or the other or both. Right? It's not amazing, but it's really amazing to see in a counseling situation when, as a counselor, and you're walking with clients through this diagram here, and you get down to here, and before you write this out, you ask specific questions and everything, and then you write it out, or you write it out, then you ask specific questions and stuff, and you write it out asking questions to actually see them drop their eyes or lower their head, see their body language start to speak very clearly and very loudly, and they look up at you and say, "You're right. You're right. I never thought of it that way. What do we do?" And it's neat when they say "we," because they look over at the spouse and they're looking at you, because now you're part of this whole thing right here to help them walk through this to develop a better relationship. Now with this same diagram right here, okay, now this is a couple that comes in that has problems and they're coming in. This same diagram right here you can use in premarital counseling as well. It's going to look different possibly and things, but you're going to draw this out to help them understand that there's going to be a point in their life where they're going to make a decision, their married life where they're going to make a decision, and they need to continue to trust God and things. And this is a way to actually help steer somebody for the conflict that's coming in the future, because we all know it's going to happen. All right, we all know it's going to happen and things. So you can use this as well in premarital counseling, but it works really well with family counseling. It can work well with individual counseling, but it's all designed right here basically to show a relationship as a husband and wife to work through the situation that they're coming into counseling for. All right. Now, with just as a last side note right here, this right down here, this self-deception, it's a self-deception, and it's unbiblical. I mean, it's to be unbiblically happy, but it's also it's self-deception that they can be somebody different. The deception to be somebody different. Now, that might not sound like a bad thing, but when they're in here and they're dealing with this issue that's right here, that's leading them to a place where they're going to be right here and things. So sometimes the questions that you ask might be a little bit challenging to ask. They might be hard for you to ask, but remember that when you're talking to them, talk to them in a way that you've developed this therapeutic relationship, so you can talk to them in a way to ask those hard questions, but don't talk down to them, talk to them. It's important to talk to them, not down to them. It's important to let them know that you're there and they're there to get help and direction in their life so that they can move back into the primary source of bonding, back into this type of companionship, the secondary bonding source. These two right here, they're good. We know that this is good, but this right here as a secondary source of bonding between a husband and wife, that's God created. That's what God created. This over here is not. This isn't part of God's plan. But because of this right here, in Genesis 3, this is what we have right now in the world. So we're dealing with people in every aspect of life along this issue right here. We're dealing with couples in this issue here. We ourselves are dealing with this as well. okay? We ourselves are dealing with this as well. So, right now, only have one that's replied, so here again, let me know whether you have an article or not and stuff. But like I said, we're probably going to change it. So, if you have any questions about this, feel free to email me a question about it, or even right now, a question as well, and things, so we can answer it. But it does look kind of complicated. It's really not. It's really not complicated. As you do this, all right, you'll develop your own style with it. And that's the way it is with a lot of things that you learn in school, all right? You learn these principles, you learn these concepts, but you're learning them, like for instance, you're learning them from me. And as I convey these, this is my approach to it, but in a counseling situation, it's going to be a little bit different. This whole thing right here might take more than an hour to go through, okay? It might take more than an hour to go through. We're going to look a little bit later here this evening on the recommended, or not the recommended, but the general time frame as far as couples counseling, as far as family counseling and stuff. But this right here might take you more than an hour to go through in a normal counseling situation. But what I'm teaching you, and as I do it, this is kind of my approach, minus the counseling situation, because in a counseling situation, I'm going to say, do you have questions? What are your thoughts about this? You know, you're okay, husband. Okay, I can see some of the body language being displayed, right? And I've mentioned that to couples before. Have stopped the counseling session, and I've asked them. I've looked at them, and basically have not necessarily that they wasn't looking at me, but I've said, okay, we're going to stop here. We're going to take a pause. You know, just push pause right here. And this was the wife of the couple. And I looked at her, and I called her by name. I said, okay, can you look at me for a second? I mean, it's not that she wasn't, but I said, can you look at me for a second? And she looked up, and she goes, what? And I said, are you okay? She goes, yeah, why? And I said, well, your body language is saying something totally different. And she looked over at her husband when I said that. She looked over at her husband, just straight over to him. And he goes, yeah, your body language is screaming. And she goes, what am I doing? So I explained it to her and everything. And she looked back at him. He goes, yes, you are. And things. What she was actually doing was she had both hands on the chair, the armrest of the chair, and both fists at the end of it. And she was clenching it really tight, and you could see her knuckles, and there's starting to be a little bit of a tremor. When I noticed that, I stopped everything. Boom. We're going to push pause here. Can you look at me? Yeah, what's going on? And she still didn't let go. And when I mentioned that to her, and she looked over at her husband, and he agreed with me, she's like, I never noticed. And I said, okay, this is what we're going to do right now. So this can take a while in a counseling session, so be prepared if you do this, that it could take a while. That's okay. You're walking through this, it's okay, and stuff. You don't have to rush through it, because this is a teaching tool. This is a way to learn, for them to learn, and for you to gain more insight into the presenting issue. Okay? So all this right here could take a while for you to go through, but that's okay. Now, granted, don't draw it out for 2 hours. Okay? Don't do that. An hour to an hour and a half, fine. 2 hours, you're pushing their ability to stay in the conversation. But an hour and a half, an hour to an hour and a half, you know, this could be done in that time frame, and they might not know that that much time has actually elapsed. And there might be a time that you're doing this with the couple, and you say, okay, and you get down here and you've done everything, you say, okay, let's draw this to a close. And they say, what, we're done already? That might happen to you. That's a good sign when that happens, because they're involved in this, and they're learning, and they're listening to you. Now, the opposite side of that is you need to make sure you're listening to them. All right? So I hope this is helpful for you as far as being able to walk a couple through things in their relationship, how it was designed, the purpose for it. The purpose for it is companionship. Companionship here, and companionship right here to here, but also individually back to God as well. Okay? So at this time, what I'm going to do, let's take a 15-minute break and give me time to get the next set of notes together and things. Review this, come back to it, review it, and things. Develop your own style with it too. So it's 15 till 7 right now. We'll come back at 7 o'clock. going to share with you some material here from an author that's not a recommended book for this class, but some of the information here is dealing with tips, principles and tips for interviewing couples and families. And what I want to share with you from this chapter, and they use the term interviewing, but you could use the term assessing as well. So this is the initial part of this is the initial intake. Erase the word assessing. Intake. Interviewing, intake, one way or another. All right, they start off, and I've said this several times, and each time that I've said it, it's been to my wife, and it's been after a session with a couple or couples. I've had several different times of working with couples that I come home and I tell her, I was like, I'm done. I'm not working with couples anymore. Then I go back and work with couples. They say right here in the first paragraph here, working with couples and families is one of the most exciting and intimidating situations a mental health professional can face. Then I would wholeheartedly say amen to that, because it really is. And they're going to unfold some things for us here that I want you guys to understand too, because when you're dealing with a blended family, the grief, a spouse has died or something like that, the non-traditional family and things, when you're dealing with these things are exacerbated, sometimes even more so. It isn't something everyone wants to do, but it can be very rewarding work. So it is something that can be rewarding, but it is a big challenge. And there are times when the challenge, you make it through the session, but when you leave the session, they leave the session, you're ready to, it's like, forget it. But then you continue to work with them, because that's what God has called you to do. Clinical interviewing or intake, that, like I said, they use the word interviewing. Clinical interviewing with one individual is a challenging task. Now imagine interviewing 2 or more clients at the same time. And here again, just to reiterate some of the things I've already said, is the fact that working with families is challenging. Okay, very challenging. Working with an individual is challenging, right? When you put in, with a family, you're going to have more than one. So when you put in 2 or more people into this equation, and they're there at the same time, it compounds itself. Instead of assessing and addressing one client's problem areas, motivations, and expectations, when interviewing couples, you have 2 people and their relationship in the room with you. They're in there with you, and here's how I work with them and stuff. I start off, and this will be said here too, I start off with a lot of upfront information right at the very beginning, and sit down and talk with both of them together for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then, depending upon how that goes, because I'm going to split them up, and I generally split them up at the beginning, right in the first session, but depending upon how I feel should be the one to leave the room. And I will tell them in the intake process, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to sit down, we'll be all 3 of us in this room together, and for about 10-15 minutes we'll work through some things, talk about some things. Then I'm going to split you up and talk to one spouse, and then after about 10-15 minutes I'll bring the other spouse in and just switch it out. And then after about 10-15 minutes we'll come back, all of us together, and close the session out. We'll probably do that throughout the course of the counseling sessions, and that's what I tell them a lot of times and stuff. So you have or people in the room with you and their problems and everything. It says here, generally, as the number of clients increase, so does the complexity of therapeutic assessment and treatment. Here's something to keep in mind, and this is brought out here too. Here's something to keep in mind. As they say, this is the fact that you as a counselor need to maintain control of the counseling situation. All right? Couples and families are powerful systems with both explicit and hidden emotional coalitions and conflicts. Okay? Couples and families are powerful systems with both explicit and hidden emotional coalitions and conflicts. And your job as a professional counselor, your job as a counselor is to work through that, to sort through it and things. Okay? Despite the fact that interviewing couples and families is more complex than interviewing individuals, most therapists must work faster with couples and families than they do with individuals. Now, this book, these authors are writing from a professional business point of view that the counselor accepts insurance, all right? And they will explain some of this here too. But in a lot of times, well, let me just go through this right here. First point here, couples and families usually come to counseling with different motivation levels, expectations, and agendas among the members. Some family members, or half of the couple, may be reluctant to step into a professional's office. This motivational variability may lead to premature termination. So that's one of the things that as a counselor, as a therapist, to keep in mind. That's important because they're going to come in and they're both coming in with different motivational levels. They're coming in with different expectations. They're coming in with different agendas. Okay, now if you have a husband and wife, there's two different things right there. Now if you add teenagers to this, or even children to it, adolescents to it, now you're adding another component to this as far as the motivational level. Now granted, with children, there's still going to be a lot of questions. They might not understand the whole process and things, but they have different expectations, right? Because you're going to work with them faster to a degree. You're not going to rush through like what I had here on the board. You're not going to rush through it because I've already said don't rush through it. You're not going to rush through it, but you have to keep in mind that there's the possibility that one of the couple, one member of the family or something like that, might not come back, or they might actually get up and walk out of the office during the course of a counseling session. So you have to keep in mind that your time with them can be limited or can be short. And even if you're not thinking about going into a professional setting and you're more in the line of a ministry church type of setting, but this is something, if you're thinking about a professional setting, is insurance companies and managed care organizations don't always reimburse for couple or family therapy. That's a sad but true statement, and it just depends on the insurance company. So just a little side note right there. There may be cultural barriers to seeking couple or family therapy. Cultural barriers. All right, there may be cultural barriers to this. The therapist must connect and develop therapeutic relationships with more than one person. Okay, now you're dealing, I mean, on an individual basis, it's one-on-one with a family, and we're not even talking about what they came into counseling for. But now you have to develop a therapeutic relationship equally with both of them, or the other members of the family as well. Any one person's strong negative feelings can lead to premature termination for the entire family or couple. Okay? And then the last point that they give here on reasons that you have to kind of be mindful that your time with them could be short is logistically It's hard for busy couples or families to find time when everyone can consistently attend therapy. Difficult schedules may reduce the time couples and families spend in counseling. This is so true, okay? This is so true. I've seen this happen too many times. And one time is too many, but I've seen it happen too many times when you're doing family counseling and you're dealing with adult children in the family, and you're also dealing with adolescents in the family. Schedules are a problem. And trying to get everybody at, or even trying to work to schedule a time is a challenge. But trying to get them all there at the same time is a challenge too. Now, I've seen this happen numerous times as well, is as the family arrives, they've all agreed on the same time, okay? They've all agreed on the same time, the same date and everything. It's all fine, everything is a go. But one family member didn't get away from work in time, and they're running 10, 15 minutes late. That messes up the whole schedule because you got part of the family there and part of the family not there. And sometimes the family members that are there, they're getting a little bit more frustrated. They're getting a little more upset with the fact of why couldn't so-and-so just, dot. And here again, it's a challenge. It is a challenge. So this is one reason why, as a therapist, you need to keep in mind of keeping things moving and that your time with them might be short. Another irony about working with couples or families is that before you begin, you must define the terms you use to describe your client. Okay, now we have in this class talked about different definitions. I don't think we've talked about this one, the word couple. There's a disagreement between professionals and the general population regarding how to define a couple. Some professionals advertise marriage or marital therapy. Others use the term couple counseling or couple therapy. The position of these authors is that they use the term marital therapy, specifically to therapeutic efforts occurring between, wrong place. They refer to couple counseling. Okay, that's what they refer to. They use the term couple counseling. Couple counseling may involve work with unmarried. Okay, now we know that this is out there. Okay, and it might walk into your office one day, church or not church setting, an unmarried gay or lesbian couple, an unmarried heterosexual couple, unmarried couples pursuing premarital counseling, couples who have made a life commitment they regard as marriage, even though not legally recognized, and legally married couples. Okay, did you catch the drift there? So couple can be a difficult term to define, but these authors provide several different ways that they have seen it. Unmarried gay and lesbian couples, unmarried heterosexual couples, unmarried couples, couples who have made a life commitment they regard as marriage, even though not legally recognized, and then legally married couples. Marital therapy refers specifically to therapeutic efforts occurring between two people committed to each other through the bonds of matrimony as defined by the laws of the state. So here's their definition of a couple. Specifically to a therapeutic effort occurring between two people committed to each other through the bonds of matrimony as defined by the laws of the state. So, defining a family. The definition of family has unfortunately become a politically loaded topic. Right? This is true. It's true. They say that we believe families come in all shapes and sizes. Family theorists and therapists differ with regard to whether they will treat subsets of family members when conducting family therapy. Okay? In our society today, the family is very transient and mobile. At any given time, the family may be defined or configured differently than it was a week ago, or even the way it will be next week. Here's another way to look at family. Children in co-parenting situations often see themselves as having two or more families in co-parenting. Children that are involved in co-parenting. In the foster care system in the state of Missouri, if you work in that arena, you're working with children that have been taken from their home and are placed in the foster care system. And in that foster care system, they're with a family, but they're not calling them a family, but they're with a family. And the longer that they're with that family, they might start to refer to them as their family, but yet their biological family is not a part of their life, but yet they have two different families. This is basically what they're talking about as far as co-parenting. All right? Children raised in extended kinship systems, all right? And then you have families may include foster children, elderly relatives, and part-time members. And part-time members, you know, you have a relative living in your basement. It might be a part-time member. It is not uncommon to do therapy with a family in which one member is living in a juvenile detention facility or group home. It's not uncommon. Here again, part of that goes back to the foster care system. If you get involved in counseling in that arena, you might find yourself dealing with families in that regards too, that the child is in a juvenile or group home. Now, granted, in those facilities, they do need counselors as well, so there might be an opportunity for employment there as well for you if that's something that God leads you to. All right, something God leads you to. All right, so interviewing stages. Interviewing stages. They're going to list 5 different stages. The first one is introduction, the introduction. All right, some of the things I said we'll refer to, we're going to look at this here. Some of it. All right, the introduction. The introduction stage includes preparation and planning, first contact or scheduling, initial meeting and greeting, and client education. All right, the preparation and planning part of it. All right, so this is still part of the introduction. It's the preparation and planning. In all clinical work, our own beliefs and values will influence the way we work. And I've referred to it as a worldview. Everybody has a worldview, and I've told people that too. We clinicians, we counselors, we therapists, we have a worldview. Your client has a worldview. Everybody has a worldview, and we work in that way, okay? But all of our work, okay, in all clinical work, our own beliefs and values will influence the way that we work. It's going to have an influence on us. It's important to understand a lot. I think it's important to have a biblical foundation, and I think it's important to have a biblical worldview as well. Okay, they go on to say that here that although you may already appreciate how important it is to develop awareness of your own issues, sometimes family-related biases or unresolved issues have a special way of surprising us, all right? Have a special way of surprising us. And we might be dealing with a couple that we didn't realize that part of that was in our life, and they're talking to us about something, and then all of a sudden it's just like, uh-oh. And they'll have a reference to transference here in this chapter as well. Clinicians may not ask important questions because they assume they know the answer. Okay, so when you're working with people, when you're working with clients, all right, you need to get comfortable. You need to be prepared. You need to be developing that therapeutic relationship that you're going to ask the important questions. And when you ask the important questions, or never assume that they know what you think that they know, all right? Clinicians may not ask important questions because they assume that they know the answer. Clinicians may get frustrated when they observe behaviors or get verbal responses that are far outside their expectations of normal family functioning, okay? Don't be surprised. You need to learn how to develop a poker face. Just need to learn how to develop a poker face. Some of the things that, and sometimes depending upon the client or depending upon where you're working at, sometimes the client might purposely say things just to see how that you will respond to it. Clinicians may project their own unresolved couple and family issues onto clients, which can interfere with effective counseling, all right? Countertransference, all right? You got transference and countertransference. So these two things can have an impact on you as a clinician and on your client as well, all right? All right, consider your ideas about how normal families look or what they look like. These are things to think about when you're getting ready to work with couples. Consider your own ideas. Okay, for example, this is a non-traditional family counseling course. It's non-traditional. The traditional part is husband, wife, biological children, all living together. Okay? This non-traditional, everything else apart from that fits into that category. So you know this as far as part of the counseling process, okay? But you need to be reminded of, so you need to consider your ideas about what normal families look like. Even though you might be dealing with a traditional family, right? Even though you might be dealing with a traditional family, that traditional family might differ from your traditional family if you come from a traditional family. So what your ideas of tradition or what a family looks like might be different from somebody else, and even though they're still traditional families, they might be different. Question whether the concept of normal families / couples exist. This question here might seem a little bit of at odds in the fact of, wait, that's kind of weird. Why should I question the concept of normal families? Yes, they do exist, but when you're sitting with a couple, your clients, they might not see that. They might not look at it that way. Well, there's not really a normal family. They don't exist, might be some of the things that they might say. Thoroughly explore and reflect on your own family history, patterns, and experiences, okay? Not that you're going to interject this in there, but this is how that when you explore this is you're getting you to understand the possibility of how those things are going to influence your understanding when you're working with them. You need to pull back and be the counselor. Even though our own beliefs and values influence the way we work, even though that's the case, and we're not setting that aside because we really shouldn't set that aside, but we need to be mindful that even though, and here again, even though you might be in a ministry setting and a Christian family comes in for counseling and they're having problems, they may not see things the way that you see things as normal. So we have to be mindful of the fact of taking the counseling approach to work through the problems, the presenting issues, without influencing or forcing or coercing. We're going to influence, I'm sorry, forget the word influence, without forcing and coercing our clients. We're always going to have an influence. So erase that word that I said there. So with your first contact, you're scheduling with couples, okay? And they even provide a scenario here too. When couples refer themselves for professional assistance one partner is usually more eager than the other to engage in counseling. Ordinarily, the person who makes the initial telephone call is more motivated for treatment than the other party. However, this isn't always the case, and it's not always the case. But a lot of times it is, but it's not always the case. On occasion, one party will call at the insistence of the other. Right? One party in this couple is insisting that, let's say that the wife is insisting that the husband make the phone call because they're having problems in their marriage, they're having problems in their home life, they're having problems with their kids. Everything about it is they're having problems with, and the wife is insisting and insisting, so therefore the husband makes the call. On occasion that happens. On occasion, okay, the one that makes the initial phone call is the one that's more eager, right? You're going to find all different scenarios here, but for the most part, this is pretty true of how it's going to happen. For cases in which one party has made an ultimatum, the less motivated party sometimes calls. So there's another side of it too. The less motivated party may make his or her attitude known early on. They might make it known early on. I'm only doing this because my spouse is making me do this. I don't see that there is a problem and everything, which leads to another thing that we could talk about too. Here's a kind of a scenario that they give here, and just to read a little bit of it for you. I'm calling to make an appointment for marriage counseling. Our marriage is falling apart. I've been trying to get my husband to come for counseling for years. Now I'm just making an appointment. Either he'll come with me or I'll come by myself. We've talked about the word triangulation, and we've looked at it how it's beneficial. We looked at it how it is not necessarily beneficial as well. They deal with this too. Couples are notorious for engaging in what therapists commonly refer to as triangulation and collation building. Definition of these two terms vary depending on theoretical orientation, but triangulation occurs when one or both members of a relationship turn to a third party to focus on instead of the couple conflict, their conflict. And when a third party is also overtly asked to take sides in the conflict, the triangulation has added a dimension of collation building. Okay, they're collating together in this. So one individual, one member of the couple. So let's do it this way. So I'll just say man. Actually, let me do it this way. Say husband. And wife. So they could, in a triangulation, bring into a third person into this, so therefore you have that. So you got the triangle right there. Basically one or the other, they're reaching out to this third person to help in this situation. Now, if they're reaching out to bring about any type of help in this situation, that could be a good thing. Now, if they're reaching out to this third person to pit one against the other, she's reaching out to this person here because, my husband, she says, he's lazy, he's no good, or whatever the case might be. She's bringing this person in to try and build a coalition against the husband. That's the negative side of it. So triangulation and coalition there, and we've talked about the definition of triangulation before. It is not unusual for the person who makes a phone call for a couple counseling to immediately begin actively soliciting sympathy from the clinician. Now, this is known as an effort to have the coalition, be building this coalition, right? It's not unusual for the person who makes the initial phone call to schedule the appointment. This is not unusual. Trust me, it is not unusual for that to happen. It's not unusual for the person making the phone call to start instantly into building sympathy or soliciting sympathy from you as a counselor. You need to be mindful of this. Here's another thing to be very mindful of too. Often the clinician's gender or sexual orientation is an important variable when couples call for an appointment. Right now, I've never had to deal with the sexual orientation part, but I've had to deal with the fact that I'm a male and things. Sometimes the wife might push back against the fact of a male counselor. No. Right, it goes on to say, unfortunately for clients, clinicians rarely practice co-therapy in clinic or independent practice settings. All right, so what they're talking about here is the fact of, let's say with a couple, all right, so the husband he wants a male counselor, and the wife looking for a female counselor. All right. It's not uncommon for this to happen. It's not uncommon for this to happen. But here's the thing: rarely, and it can happen, but rarely do these two actually work together in this type of situation. I've been a part of it and the thing was the female was working with both of them together, and she approached me about seeing the husband, maybe because she was a female, so the counselor approached me about this and said, would you be willing to talk to the husband because of just the fact of male to male? I think he'll open up to you more and things. So I started seeing the husband by himself. Then we got together in this situation, okay? Rarely does it happen, and honestly, it was kind of difficult. Rarely does it happen to have co-therapy, and we were in a private practice, independent practice and stuff, all right? The one thing about this situation is money. Okay? And here's one of the biggest things to have to deal with in regards to this if you get involved in it and things. If you get involved in it. You're paying for, who's going to pay for both professionals? Okay? Who's going to pay for both professionals? Generally, however, having two professionals work jointly with a couple or family is too costly. All right, so this is an issue with this type of situation. These are the counselors down here. She's working there, he's working here, and then let's say let's bring them both together. Okay, it can be very costly because you got this female's counselor's fee, you got the male counselor fee and things. The husband and wife, even though they're together, are they going to pay? Are you as counselors going to agree that you're going to split the one fee, or are you going to make them both pay the same fee? So it can be costly. It's an obstacle that families have to deal with. It's an obstacle that therapists have to deal with. Here's a scenario that they give. Sometimes people coming for couples counseling prefer to see a male or a female therapist. This is so they're putting this forward. So the client says, actually she never said whether she wants to work with a lady or a man. I guess she'd rather work with a lady counselor, but I'd rather talk to another man about this. Yeah, you better schedule us with a man, right? Now, he's the one this is the client talking. So in this scenario, this story that they're given here, is the fact of sometimes this is the case. But since the man is the one making the phone call, he's like, okay, let's go with the man. Okay, with this right here, with the man saying, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and schedule with a man. He didn't say, you know, his wife. He said his wife was like, well, you know, she didn't say, you know, she didn't say whether it was a man or a lady, but she'd probably rather work with a lady. But hey, since I'm talking to you, let's schedule a man. Okay, this client's choice may represent an initial hope for building a coalition. Okay, this might represent that. Here's some things to keep in mind when you're working with people, all right? Keep this in mind when you're working with people. You shouldn't feel pressured to answer personal questions about your sexual orientation, religious beliefs, number of children, and or other personal matters unless it's your practice to do so. Okay, I'm going to add to that, okay? Now, these authors here say unless it's your practice to do so. All right, I'm going to say you need to be extremely careful with what you reveal. Because if you're revealing things, then you're practicing this countertransference part. All right, and then sometimes the clients don't pay you to come, or they're not coming to counseling, whichever the situation might be. They're not coming to counseling to hear your story. They're the ones that are that you need to listen to them. So don't expose or don't talk about your family to them. And in some regards, you need to keep it quiet just for security purposes. Okay, just to keep your family safe. Just for that reason. Don't tell them where you live. You don't do that. I've worked in a place where they didn't know where I lived. They didn't know my wife, and I wasn't going to tell them. And I didn't tell them about my family and stuff like that. All right? Don't make it a practice to do this, because if you're doing this, then you just be careful. All right? Just be careful. Okay, so you've scheduled the appointment. All right? You schedule the appointment. Now it comes time for the meeting part. All right. Now, keep in mind, as this is taking place, that this triangulation and coalition building, you got to keep this in mind. All right. Clinicians should be careful to greet couples with relatively equal warmth and mild enthusiasm. All right. Couples may be watching for subtle signs that the clinician favors one client over the other. And you might be accused of you doing that. They might accuse you of that. You have to greet them in the same way. Okay? You have to greet them in the same way. Whenever possible, avoid even the appearance of coalition. Okay? Whenever possible, avoid the appearance of this. Equal treatment is the order of the day. Equal treatment is the order of the day. It might be a challenge, but this is something that you're going to have to do. Potential triangulation makes chatting with the couple in the waiting room a delicate task requiring thought and observation. Okay, let me read that again. Potential triangulation makes chitty-chatting with couples in the waiting room a delicate task requiring thought and observation. Okay, when you go to the waiting room to greet the clients, the couple, all right, and you're talking back and forth with them and stuff, all right, you have to be very mindful of what you're doing and what you're saying, because you don't want the appearance of triangulation to be there. You don't want the appearance of building any type of favoritism, the coalition type of building. You don't want that to be there. You have to be mindful of the fact of what you're doing and what you're saying. Very important. It's very important to keep this in mind. All right? Don't forget. If you talk about the weather, the woman may take offense because she's already angry with her husband. This is just scenarios that they're putting forth, but understand that as these writers are putting this forth, they've experienced this. Right? Who she believes talks about the weather too often instead of more important issues. If you talk about how it was how it was to locate the office, they may plunge quickly into the conflict regarding who took the wrong turn when navigating to your office. Okay? So this is what they're saying in the fact that you have to be mindful of what you're actually getting ready to do. It requires thought and observation. Okay, you got to be careful with this, right? Because this might happen. When meeting and greeting couples in conflict, virtually anything you say can and will be used against you. And I could say an amen to that too. All right, when you're dealing with when you're meeting and greeting couples in conflict, okay, just inside the waiting room or just out there as you just first meet them, you haven't done anything as far as any type of counseling or intake or anything else of that. You're meeting them for the first time, and you're doing just the small talk. Anything that you say, okay, can and will be used against you. And I'm kind of pausing for effect here because that's the hard part, is when it is. And you might find yourself backtracking, trying to smooth out the situation because that's not what you intended. And that's not what you were doing, but that's what was interpreted. The request for help usually centers on a description of certain troubling behavior patterns in one or more family members. So when they're coming together and you've met them and you've greeted them and things, okay, they've requested help, okay, and it centers on a description for certain troubling behaviors or behavioral patterns in one or more family members. Trying to think of an illustration, and my mind's not working for me right now as far as how to help you understand that. Let's just say that you have a family session and the mother's upset with not only with the husband but with her son because the father and son do things that just to her is troubling behavior. You know, she doesn't like it, and it just irritates her and things. So as it's being described, it's just creating tension in her and things, and she's just really upset with this. All right. When you make a family schedule for a family session, okay, and this is family therapy, here's a challenge, and it was mentioned earlier, here's a challenge to try and arrange a time when all the family members can attend an initial interview, okay? You want them to be there for the initial interview. It's really difficult if they're not there, that when they do show up and all of a sudden you're going back over what the initial interview was just to bring them up to speed, which may not be a bad thing, but you're not accomplishing anything. So if at all possible, have all family members there for the initial one. All members may not attend all sessions. Okay, you don't have to have them attend all sessions, but you want them there. Meeting with everyone who lives in the family home is standard procedure when initiating family therapy. You do want them there, okay? You want them to be a part of it. And here again, just reiterating the fact of when you're greeting the family, okay? be mindful of what you're saying, but you know, you do need to have small talk, but you need to be careful. You know, it requires consideration. Okay, and we're going to take a little break here. As with individuals, couples and families must be educated regarding counseling procedures and the plan for the interview, right? You have to educate the family on this, and if it's just a husband and wife, it's an easier task. If you've got children involved, it could be a little bit more complicated, but you need to explain to them, you need to educate them what the procedure is going to be like. What is this going to look like for them, all right? How is this going to unfold for them, so that they have a better understanding of the therapy session, of the practice itself, what is going to be required of them, what is required of you, confidentiality, how that works, and everything. You need to explain confidentiality to them and make sure that everybody understands confidentiality, because if it ever came to it, you don't want to violate confidentiality because it needs to be. All right, you're a mandated reporter as a counselor, and something happens, and you deem it that it needs to be hotlined, and you tell them that you have to hotline this. You don't want them to all of a sudden, it's like, what, you told me? So you need to explain confidentiality so that they understand it, and everybody in that family understands it. When it comes to adolescence, it might be a challenge for them to understand it, but you need to break it down so that they have a better understanding of it. It's very important. You need to educate the family on this procedure, okay? You need to educate them on this procedure. All right, I got 14 minutes till, a little bit. We're gonna come back at the top of the hour, okay? So at 8 o'clock, we'll come back. Okay, I was talking about confidentiality before we took a little bit of break, and I'm just gonna finish up here this evening with just a couple more things and then close tonight out. All right, so we were talking about educating the family as far as what they're to expect and things. So part of the information, once again, not only the confidentiality, okay, you're educating them regarding counseling procedures and the plan for the interview and stuff. So not only that as far as confidentiality, but you can also say things as far as, like I said earlier, meeting separately with each member of the couple or family. All right, they need to know that if you're going to do that, and I would suggest that should be part of it. Another thing that they need to know is whether you'll take phone calls from one member of the couple or family that might involve discussing couple or family issues. All right, they need to know. All right, are you going, will you accept phone calls from the wife as she's talking about, and this isn't during a session, this is during the week, she might call, and are you going to accept phone calls and things? One thing to keep in mind is if you're going to accept phone calls, you need to keep it to a short period of time, because they will keep you on the phone for quite some time. All right, so are you going to accept phone calls? The third thing, okay, whether you'll agree to keep secrets temporarily or on an ongoing basis. All right, are you going to keep secrets? Okay, now here's something from the International Association for Marriage and Family Counseling. It's part of their code of ethics. They say, quote, unless alternate arrangements have been agreed upon by all participants, statements by a family member to the counselor during an individual counseling or consultation contact are not disclosed to the other family members without the individual's permission. So in other words, you need to inform the family in this education part, not only the confidentiality, the fact of how you're going to conduct the sessions, meeting with them separately, whether you're going to take a phone call or you're going to keep secrets, but the fact of what the International Association of Marriage and Family Counselors or Counseling says is that unless an alternate arrangement has been made by all participants in this, okay? So everybody involved in the family, unless an arrangement has been made, their code of ethics state that you are not going to disclose to another family member what the individual has given to you in those private sessions unless that individual gives you permission. Right? Part of the reason for this is the building of a therapeutic relationship. Part of it is the confidentiality part. You're respecting the individual. Now, I've made statements in these disclosures that, and especially with children involved, and the fact of what you say to me stays with me unless, and there's the confidentiality, but I also add not only just the confidentiality, I state also unless there's harmful behavior that you're involved in, or that you're involved in something promiscuous or dangerous and this and that and a couple other things. I said, and especially if they're underage, then it's like, I want you to know that this is what we will do. We'll bring mom and dad in, or mom in, or dad in, and I'm not going to tell them. We're going to talk about it, but you're going to tell them and things, and okay, type of thing. Another thing too is part of the informing that needs to take place. Always inform the couple and or the family about what will be expected of them during the interview and the counseling sessions themselves, and what behaviors are unacceptable. Okay? Need to explain that to them. What is acceptable behavior, what is not acceptable behavior, what your role is in this session, and how that you will enforce, and really you will enforce the fact that that's unacceptable and things. You need to be in charge, you need to be in control as a therapist. Another thing that you can tell them, and that they probably should know, okay, is what's going to be required of them. What's going to be required of them. And are you going to, what type of approach or therapy are you going to use with them? And, you know, let them know. Are you going to require homework from them? All right? Let them know up front. This is all a part of this initial intake process and things. You know, inform them, help them to understand everything. You're educating them. Okay, now as you move beyond that, and you're moving more now into the beginning part of it, one important component of the opening for couples, no matter what comes next, is to obtain information from each person about why they've come for counseling, from each one. Okay, you need to get it from each one. You need to allow each person to speak and things. And that's another thing too, when you're giving them that beginning talk, in fact, of, you know, you're letting each person have the opportunity to speak, and you're going to permit each person the opportunity to speak without interruption and things. They provide a couple of scenarios here as far as an opening statement from you. The first one, in the fact of hearing from each one, says excuse me, I want to hear about what each of you believe brought you here and what you want to work on as a couple. It doesn't matter who starts, but I want to hear from each of you. I know you might disagree on some things, so you can check in with each other along the way, and I will too. All right. That's one scenario. Okay, another one they give here is, my plan for today's session is as follows. First, I'd like to get to know you folks. Second, I'll need some information about what brings you in. Third, while I want to hear from you, I will be asking a considerable number of questions today. And finally, by the time we're finished, I'd like to be able to give you some initial feedback and let you know if I think I can be of service to you. This one right here, that last clause there, and the fact that if I can be of service to you, this is a good thing to keep in mind in the beginning part too, is the fact of, am I going to be able to work with you? I've talked about this to you guys before, in the fact of don't be afraid to refer. Okay, don't be afraid to refer. That might need to come into play, and they need to know this at the beginning, in fact of, okay, let's go through this first initial session, let's do the intake, let's do all this and everything, and you've gone through all that we've already talked about here, and this part here is important because you want them to know that, hey, I might not be qualified to help you, and at this point in the first session would be a good time, if I'm not qualified to help you, if I don't feel like I can help you and stuff, to make a referral and things. So at this point is a good time to interject that. I like that about that statement, about this one. This second scenario they give us here is because it makes that statement there and things. Okay, at this time though, I'm going to bring this to a close this week and things. So once again, just let me know and things where you're at, if everything's okay, what's going on and stuff. If not, I'll assume that everything is going well. And like I said earlier, we're just going to pull the literature part, the assignment, and I will just go ahead and give each of you the 25 points for that, but don't worry about doing it. If you found an article and you've already started, my apologies and things, but I know that several of you have run into some snags and stuff as far as getting it and everything, but not to rehash everything we talked about at the beginning. But anyway, 3 more weeks left, folks. Okay, 3 more weeks. Keep up the good work, and we will see you next week. Have a great evening.